I'd like to welcome everybody to the January 28, 2015 City of Rapid City Legal and Finance Committee, or as it's better known, a good time to have a heart attack. First order of business is a roll call and determination of a quorum.
Here.
She's a little older. Here. Here. Thank you. Up next is adoption of the agenda. Any additions or deletions from the agenda? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Second. Motion by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. Up next is general public comment. Now is the time for members of the public to discuss or express any concerns to the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda except for placement on the agenda by unanimous vote of the council members present. I currently have no speaker request forms for general public comment. Does anybody here wish to speak on any of those items that's not on the agenda? Okay, I'll move on to consent items numbers 1 through 26. I'm going to open public comment for items 1 through 26. I will go first to Mr. Mark Weber. Sir, if you could approach the podium and identify yourself. The green light. Speak on 27. Yeah. Oh, 20. Pardon. Yeah, well, you know. Thank you. Never been accused of being the brightest bulb. Up next, we'll go to nobody. Anybody wish to speak on items 1 through 26 in the consent calendar? No speaker request forms. I'm going to close public comment on those items. And I will now do the council members to remove items from consent calendar. First, go to the finance officer, Pauline Sumption.
Can you please remove number 15?
Number 15. Up next is Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. Number 9, please.
Number 9, Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Item number 26.
Item number 26. Any other further items for removal? At this point, we have number 9, 15, and 26. Is that correct? I entertain a motion to approve the balance of those motions.
Second.
The motion is to approve items 1 through 26 with the exclusion of 9, 15, and 26. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 9 is a summary of free parking requests in downtown area. The chair recognizes Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to pull this item because I not necessarily had any concerns, but I just want to raise the flag a little bit just to make sure that the communication is working well between the finance office and the police department on this. Spoke to the finance officer a little bit. So I just want to encourage that communication, seeing as the police are the ones that have the ability to prove these. We have bond requirements for our parking, so I just want to make sure that we don't fall into a situation some year where, you know, we're struggling to make our required bond payments for the infrastructure that we have for parking. So I don't know if the chief or finance officer have anything to say there, but I just wanted to raise that small concern.
Chair recognizes Chief Carl Jagras. Excuse me.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out, as an example, item number 10 on the agenda here is a request for the Rapid City Masons to hold a meeting at their building, which is on Kansas City Street, and they're requesting free parking for 20-some spaces all day that day. So just that's an example of when a significant request comes in, that it's my intention to bring it to council with a recommendation for approval first, and then if that becomes an annual request, just for the efficiency of it, to handle those in-house so that this body doesn't have to go through each and every request that we have. But that's the one way that we're trying to make sure that we aren't overdoing free parking requests in the downtown area.
Any further discussion? Chair recognizes Darla Drew.
Isn't this almost a moot point now that we have the no tickets on the first offense? I mean, I don't know why you'd have to necessarily block off particular places because there's no ticket threat, as it were.
No, if you were to leave a vehicle in the downtown area all day, you would get more than one ticket during that day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the no ticket thing is just for the 2-hour time period, correct?
It is for your first violation.
First violation, yeah.
If you leave a car, such as in most of these circumstances, if you leave a car parked in the downtown area all day, you would be subject to more than one citation during that day. So your first one would be free, your second one would be $10, and third would be $15, and subsequent $25.
it's my estimation that a lot of organizations don't know about this, and I would think just bringing it out like Mr. Laurenti just did would make them probably more aware, and you might get more requests. So just kind of keep that in mind, that we might need to, at some point, set a limit.
I agree.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Motion is to not, I don't have a motion, I need a motion to approve. Entertain a motion? This is acknowledge, or it's an approval, isn't it? Oh, it's just acknowledge, okay. Motion to acknowledge by Nordstrom, second by Laurenti. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. Item number 15 is a resolution 2014-119B, levying assessment for cleanup of miscellaneous properties. Chair recognizes the Finance Officer, Pauline Sumption.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I need to remove numbers 11, 15, 23, and 29 from this resolution, as they have changed ownership hands since the original notices went out.
Maggie, you got note of that? Okay. Any further discussion on those items? Entertain a motion to approve? So moved. Motion approved by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 26. Item number 26 is a resolution of 2015-003 dissolving tax increment district number 53, generally described as being located at the southeast corner of Catron Boulevard and Sheridan Lake Road. Chair recognizes Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is one of the better things that we have, and I'll call it a tool in our toolbox that we have for the city of Rapid City, and especially when it comes to the area of public development. The risk is all on the developer and not on the property taxes, or excuse me, not on the taxpayers of the city of Rapid City. And then the positive gain from the district being evaluated or valued at $132,000. Now it's almost $7 million. So it's a tremendous tool that we have. It's not the best tool we have, but it could get access to, and that's up to the state legislature to deal with things like that. But one of the things that we have in our toolbox that I think is a very good, useful tool that we can utilize, and I hope they continue on with utilizing this ordinances and the needs to, which need to be adjusted a little bit further, but I think it's a good positive thing that we have. Thank you.
Okay, motion. Entertain a motion.
Move to approve.
Motion approved by Weifenbach, second by Laurenti. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 27 and 28, non-consent items. I will open public comment items 27 and 28. And sir, Mr. Weber, if you please would approach again. Sorry, I jumped the gun on you last time. Okay. The green light means you have 3 minutes. The yellow light means 30 seconds. The red light, sir, would you please wrap up your comments at that point, and please identify yourself for the record. Thank you.
Excuse me, my name is Mark Weber. Excuse me, I used to be the former business agent for the Teamsters Union from January 76 through October of 96. During that time, we represented truck drivers, UPS people, school employees, mine workers, law enforcement agencies, and the Rapid City Fire Department at that time. This very issue that was come before us today again was talked about, as you well know, 25 years ago, and I'm standing in the same room asking you to approve the same ordinance that was approved last time. I don't really have any much more to say than that. It's just very important that it be taken care of and cleaned up. We thought back 25 years ago that the ordinance was drafted and it was a done deal. So I'm here to ask you to do it again, please.
Thank you, sir. Up next, I will go to Mr. Mike Rosler. Am I saying that correct, sir? Yes. Mr. Mike Rosler, you have 3 minutes, sir. If you please identify yourself for the record. And item number 27.
Mike Ressler, Rapid City, worked for the fire department from April of '79 through April of 2010, retired as a battalion chief. I wrote you all a letter last week, and I'll answer any questions about that letter, but I'm here today to speak on a slightly different subject, and I want to start out with, I don't mean any insult to members of the airport board or even want to be rude, but I do want to say that I believe they don't know what they don't know, and how I want to address that is through a story rather than, it's easier said than it is to write down. And when I was about 4 months into the job, they sent me to the Southside Station to work underneath a a guy that I respected and revered and probably feared at the time. And I went on my first call where I was the driver. He and I were sent to the Sioux Drive-In for a car fire, and just two of us in the brush truck. And I went to pull out of the station. My left foot was shaking so bad that I killed it a couple times and could barely operate the vehicle. And I was a truck driver professionally in the military, and also for 2 years hauling freight around Rapid City before I was hired. I knew how to drive a truck. I knew how to run a clutch, but I was shaking so bad I could barely function. And we finally got there with Lieutenant Bush looking at me like, "Son, what is your problem?" These good men behind me will tell you that that's happened to them. They won't probably raise their hand right now, but this is not an uncommon thing to happen. And I found out later that that is what you call a physical response to emotional stress. At the time, all I knew is I had a tough time functioning. My point here is this. When you work for the city fire department, you're exposed experientially to a lot of calls. You go to a lot of emergency calls, and you get to experience just horrible losses of property, and you also get to experience ghastly trauma and death, and these things become second nature over time. A contract employee working aircraft rescue firefighting may go years before they ever go to their first call. And by the nature of that type of firefighting, indeed many professionals go their whole career with only going to 1 or 2 calls. And it's very stressful when you respond to an aircraft crash. You will have to be in control of yourself. You'll have to be able to function, and most important, you'll have to be able to think. And if this is your first call, I don't think you're going to be able to do that. And so what you get with Rapid City firefighters providing aircraft rescue firefighting services, you get people that are experienced, you get people that have been through the emotional ups and downs and the trials and the physical stresses, and they're good to go. They also have a lot of knowledge. They also have a lot of experience and background that they bring to the job. I don't think you can get that with a contract, low bid type employee situation. You might, but I don't think you will. I think that before this decision's made, we need to be wise here. We need to ask, is this the wise thing to do? In light of our past experience, in light of our current circumstances, whether they're financial or whatever they are, and also in light of what we want for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Up next, the chair is going to recognize Todd Ossenford is going to read a letter for General Alexander, excuse me, what's his last name? Carpenter, pardon me.
General Carpenter.
General Carpenter. So I'm going to give him a little extra time because he's
the
speaking on behalf.
mayor. The mayor told me that the letter is linked to the agenda. So did you guys already see it? Already read it?
We have, but it's up to you.
Boy, this is like Daniel looking into the lines, and you guys know the position that I'm going to take here. But
so are you going to read the record?
I'm not going to read the letter.
Okay, so all right.
So
thank you, sir.
I'll just start off with my comments, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Legal and Finance Committee. Oh, what a tangled web we weave when we practice to deceive. The mayor has chosen to politicize this issue. The hard-working firemen in the Rapid City Fire Department have been politicized so that he can make political gains. He's drugged the airport and the fire department into this mess. In case you didn't know it, there's an election coming in June. He's told you and everybody else that this is a cleanup item from 25 years ago. That's not being truthful. As a former city councilman, I was in your shoes. I was always leery of letters of support coming out to agenda items attached before the agenda item was already written. The amount of work and effort that he has expended on getting this ordinance passed is amazing. And as members of the committee and members of the city council, you should take a step back. Say, what's the motive? What's going on? Does it seem a little orchestrated and over the top to you? It does to us. I'm going to be like Paul Harvey today and tell you the rest of the story. You appointed the airport board to stay out of politics. keep our heads down, do the business of the airport, and run it the best way we possibly can. We've been doing that. Yesterday was a historic day at the airport board meeting. Not only did we have a number of proud firefighters there, but we passed an unprecedented agreement between the Rapid City Fire Department and the airport. The MOU was signed and ratified after 2 years of discussion and 1 whole year of hard work of getting our department heads in the room and hammering it out with the assistance of the city attorney. Yes, why an MOU? Why do we need it? Why is this even being talked about again? Every year, I'll give you a little education, you've appointed the board to do your bidding at the airport. Every year, the airport has to submit a budget to our airline partners when we negotiate the airline leases. Every single one of our airline partners asks us, the board, when we're negotiating new leases that are good for a year, why, Rapid City, South Dakota, are your ARF services line item in your budget way more expensive than all of the like airports in our region? All of the airports in our region that have the same enplanements and deplanements and takeoffs and landings, your ARF services are significantly higher. And we say, well, there was an accident in 1968, and we as a community decided that this will never happen again. That accident caused us as a community to come together. The fire department, the city council, and the airport board at that time decided we'll never again only not have fire station there, but we'll have 2. The FAA requires 1. We'll have 2. So if a plane load of cheerleaders go down coming back from a state basketball tournament, we're able to get them out of the plane and maybe save some lives. So in addition to that, the way we justify that budget, that line item to our airline partners is we say, we have firefighters that are on Team Airport. And if you look at line 26 in our budget that we submitted to you, our operational costs are significantly lower than everybody else, like airports, like size, because our firefighters step up to the plate for us. They do security checks. They do this, that, and the other thing. Not in their union job description, but all the past chiefs, all the past fire departments, all the past airport boards have worked together and been on Team Airport. Good government. Trying to verify.
Will you be available for questions in a minute here?
Okay, I'm fast forwarding. It's an important issue, and I can stop now and come back to the city council, or I can try and finish.
If you could just,
okay.
I'm sure maybe we can ask you some questions here in a minute.
So we didn't believe the airline partners when they told us that our budget was significantly higher. So in March of 2014, we submitted RFPs to private ARF service providers. They came back. Just as an exercise to verify what the airlines were telling us, because they won't share the budgets with the other of the airports with us. We shared those numbers with Rod and Chief Maltevern, and they agreed. They were significantly cheaper, significantly. But in that same meeting, they pointed out what the airport does for us. They provide all of these extra services. So together as a whole, it's the best thing in the world for the Rapid City Fire Department to provide those services. The board might have been born at night, but it wasn't last night. So give the board a little credit.
Okay.
It
Sir,
was
if you
never,
could, I'm sorry,
never,
if you
never.
could wrap up, sir.
Okay.
I'm giving you quite a bit of leeway here, and
All
I
right.
give Sykes
It was
one.
never, one last thing, was never, ever the intent of the Rapid City Board to eliminate the Rapid City Fire Department as a service provider. Never, ever. And the mayor has spun this issue out of control. We've got a packed house at Legal and Finance, and he's made a campaign issue.
Mr.
Thank you.
Ossenford, thank you. Okay. Any further speaker request forms? I have none. Anybody wish to speak on this item? Okay. Closing public comment on items 27 and 28. Number 27 is the introduction and first reading of ordinance 6029 to codify the relationship between the Rapid City Regional Airport Board and Rapid City Department of Fire and Emergency Service by adding section 2.72.115 to the Rapid City Municipal Code. Motion approved by Laurenti, second by Richie Nordstrom. And Chair recognize Chief Mike Maltevern, please.
Thank you. I'll just go ahead and provide a few brief comments here. Maybe not that brief, but typically don't like to do this, but I've got some prepared statements I'm going to present to you on behalf of the fire department and my position as fire chief. So good afternoon, and thanks for that opportunity. I want to speak specifically to Ordinance 6029 and some of the services that we are currently providing at the airport, and also hopefully shed some light. To this point, I've worked solely on the MOU, as Todd described, that we passed yesterday, that truly defines a working relationship between the airport and the fire department. And to go back in my history, I can go back to when Jason Green was the city attorney, and I asked, what is in writing between the airport and the fire department? At the time, there was nothing, and that was nearly 8 years ago, and here we are today, still trying to hammer out the issues. I've maintained the position that this proposed ordinance today is that purely of a policy and is a responsibility of the mayor and the city council and not necessarily staff. As we've heard, that this was unfinished business from 1989. I've also been asked recently by members of the board and also members of the council for my opinion on this proposed ordinance. So that is the reason today that I felt obligated and compelled to offer my opinion. I also feel that I'm professionally qualified to offer the same. Throughout my career, I've specialized in many disciplines in the fire department, and I believe that's one of the reasons I was promoted fire chief. At 20 years of wildland firefighting experience, at 5 years on our hazardous materials response team. Ironically, I spent 5 years as a captain at the Rapid City Regional Airport managing that fire station. Interestingly enough, I also spent 12 years of my career working part-time for a private contract ambulance company. At that time, throughout that 12-year process, I witnessed the demise of that private ambulance company and their inability to provide a quality service while maintaining a profit. Therefore, in 2003, by this council, that service was relinquished to the fire department to provide for the community. Now today, one of my responsibilities of many is to oversee a $3 million ambulance enterprise fund. In the 1990s, there was a shift in providers of ambulance operations throughout the country. The majority of ambulance providers used to be for-profit companies like American Medical Response or Rural Metro being a couple of the largest. Today, the largest provider of ambulance services are municipal fire departments, similar to that of Rapid Cities. Rural Metro was one of the companies that provided a price quote and is one of those that experienced that decline in the 90s. As an example, August 4th, 2013, Rural Metro filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, citing an estimated $735 million in debt, a declining revenue, and financial setbacks. Rural Metro, again, was one of the companies who submitted a price quote, as Todd alluded to earlier. I believe my experience gives me a well-rounded and qualified perspective on this issue. It's also been mentioned yesterday in the letter I believe you may have received, or in dialogue yesterday, that it was mentioned that good fire chiefs come and go. And I respect that statement and agree with it, as I will likely be one of those of the ranks, hopefully, of a good chief that will come and go. Since 1989, there have been 5 fire chiefs that remained committed to the service we provide at the airport. They've been part of Team Airport. Our dedication and commitment to the airport has remained consistent throughout many changes in fire department leadership. Now, conversely, many airport directors and board members have also come and gone, and the fire department has had to endure a certain degree of uncertainty at the airport because of this very issue. As alluded to, it almost comes up on an annual basis. There has been a philosophical difference between the two departments. The airport is operated as an enterprise fund and works to generate enough revenue to account for their expenditures, or somewhat of a profit-driven business model. The fire department, being a general fund cost center with a core mission of public safety, tends to put profits and the financial, the bottom line, a little bit lower in our list of priorities. This is where the two philosophies have come together and maybe somewhat clashed. This repeated attempt at cost savings and looking for efficiency should be an ongoing process or an exercise that is spelled out between airport staff and the fire department staff in the MOU that was adopted yesterday. So I think we've made some headway. This MOU keeps this continual scrutiny on our budgets and efficiencies, and I appreciate that we're going to be held accountable for that. However, in my professional opinion, outsourcing public safety should not be an option and is not in the best interest of our citizens. Second point here is local government. As many of you know, if you research different forms of government, local government was established in the country under some guiding principles, one of which is to protect the people. You see that today with police and fire. We call that today public safety under that flagship. Public safety and critical infrastructure are core functions of local government. They are the first and last services that local government must provide. About 4 years ago, this city and leaders on the council and also the department directors went through an exercise and we discussed how would we respond to a continuing economic decline. All parties involved agreed that critical infrastructure and public safety would be the last to go. In essence, that is what this ordinance says will happen at the airport, that the fire department will be the last to go. It has also been alluded to that this ordinance may reduce accountability for the fire department and even more specifically the fire chief. I've heard that comment expressed to me directly. We've addressed this in the MOU that was passed yesterday that outlines expectations, working relationships, and duties provided at the airport. The fire chief and fire department remain under the highest degree of accountability. As you know, I'm accountable to the airport board under this MOU now. I'm also appointed by the mayor and held accountable by him as one of his department heads. And my position is also confirmed by the city council. So most importantly, I'd like to reiterate, I am morally and ethically accountable to the citizens of Rapid City, as is every member of the Rapid City Fire Department. In fact, we have a representative form of government, as you know, and I answer to the citizens through each of you as our elected officials. So why not have a policy in place that protects public safety at the airport? I've also been quoted yesterday as saying that I would put up our fire department against any other. And I stand behind that statement because of the dedication and commitment I have witnessed over the 25-year career with the Rapid City Fire Department that I've enjoyed. And I will often state that the fire department's most important asset are not fire trucks or fire stations, but our firefighters. We have 143 employees that are some of the most qualified, trained, and professional first responders in the country, and I'm proud of their service. For instance, at this very moment, I looked up today at our roster for how we've staffed the department today for this 24-hour shift. We have 13 former or present airport firefighters on duty in our fire stations today. So if there was an incident today, I can muster 13 people that have served at the airport and would be able to get through those emotional challenges of that plane crash. In closing, I'll remind you that I've been asked to speak up about this ordinance, and I hesitated as I felt this was a policy decision that needed the attention of the mayor and city council. Since being asked, I felt qualified and compelled to speak today. So what can I offer as fire chief? I assure you that I will remain accountable to the highest degree possible. I will work collectively and cooperatively with the airport to remain fiscally responsible, as I know that this is a concern of theirs annually. I will continue to prepare our community and the fire department for emergencies, both in the city, around the city, and at the airport. I will dedicate resources to preventing incidents from happening in our community, as well as the airport. And if our preparedness and prevention efforts fail and an incident occurs, I will see to it that our 143 members strong will respond and act with courage, bravery, and professionalism. We will remain dedicated and committed to the safety of the airport and to this community as we have for nearly 130 years. The Rapid City Fire Department was established in 1886. It is this commitment that is worthy of this ordinance, I believe. I will stand for questions and thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I guess before I close, I'll just take this chance now before I'm sure there'll be something coming back here, but a couple of things that Todd alluded to. One of the reasons that we have two firefighters, that in addition to the additional duties that Todd alluded to that we have to justify to the airlines, is the FAA, who is the federal guiding umbrella over the airport, has financially supported two firefighters at the airport. And the way they've done that is they supported a brand new station design and construction that happened around 2010. And they've also recently, in the last 2 years, purchased a brand new second ARF vehicle. So there is a financial and philosophical support from the FAA to basically support the staffing model that we have at Rapid City Regional Airport. Also, for clarification, Chief Seals and I did meet with the airport board on a couple of different occasions to discuss three primary issues, the reasons that they went out for the price quotes from the contractors. And one of them that Todd mentioned was the fact that in their findings that the two contractors were significantly cheaper. And I just would ask for clarification, and I would certainly pitch this back to the airport board and say that in our findings, when we all met and we went down through the numbers, we found that one of the contractors was cheaper and one was actually more expensive than what the fire department is reimbursed from the airport. The one that was cheaper than the airport, or excuse me, than the Rapid City Fire Department, asked for a 3.75% growth annually. If you looked at the difference in prices, over a number of years, that contract would end up being more expensive. We looked at the growth of the Rapid City Fire Department over the last, I believe it was 8 years, 10 years, and our growth was 2.01%, so you could see a diminishing amount of return if you would have hired that contractor. So at the end of the day, we still would have even been cheaper than 2 contractors, and obviously we're more interested in a quality service and a value-added service than we are low bid. So with that, I'll stand for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And Chair recognizes Alderman Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to start out by saying that it's unfortunate, I think, some of the comments that we've heard already today. For me personally, this is not about union, non-union, about campaigns or not campaigns. I'm not up for re-election this year. So if this didn't make sense, I can guarantee you I would be voting against it in election year or not. I think everybody understands how I vote and my perspective on government. So the fact of the matter is, the first thing I'd like to say is I'd like to thank the mayor for his leadership on this particular issue, because of the fact that it is such an important thing for the safety of all of our citizens here in Rapid City, but for the visitors as well. It's not just for the citizens. I mean, we all know, probably more so, we have visitors coming into Rapid City. So we need to make sure that we're taking care of all of the people who use that airport. So it's an infrastructure item, and that's important to me. And I spoke with the chief prior on this, and I agree wholeheartedly, and I understand the savings initially and the overall increases that one of the contractors needed. Ultimately, it would exceed the cost. So, and I don't blame the airport board for going out and doing it. That's their job. That's what they should do. But I think it's extremely important that we codify, if you will, put this down in an ordinance, because it's that important. It's extremely important that the safety is at its best, and I believe that the best trained individuals to do that is our fire department, because we spend a lot of money training that group of people, and they work hard every year to make sure that they're trained and ready to go at a moment's notice. And not to say that a private corporate or private company could do that, but all we need is one fire, one catastrophic fire, and lives lost at the airport. And what will citizens say if we were using a contractor? I can guarantee you somebody would bring it up. Somebody would say, why would the mayor allow somebody to provide fire services at our airport for our citizens or for all of the visitors that come to Rapid City? And I wholeheartedly and 100% support the mayor on this. I appreciate his leadership on it, and I believe most of the council will find their support as well. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderman Ron Weifenbach. Excuse me, I can't read today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I wanted to go on the record saying that at some point in time I would like to change our decorum when it comes to legal and finance to allow people to really express their point. Mr. Ossenfort had 3 minutes, and we had a long representation from the fire department, which I've had conversations with the fire department. I'd listened to Mr. Ossenfort's short presentation. I think from what I understand is that they were surprised that the ordinance came about. I think that they had been negotiating in good faith on both sides. And I can completely understand where people come from on this, because I have been on the opposite side. And the first thing people will say to me is, you're a naysayer, you don't believe in me, you don't believe in us, whatever. And the fact of the matter comes down to, from what I can see, is that they wanted to understand what was going on. The conversations I've had with Chief and his assistant both have been very positive. And I haven't had a lot of opportunity because this council had voted to allow our airport person to be on hiatus, so I had not had an opportunity to visit with him. Do I support the ordinance? Probably in general, yeah. I'd say that my working with the fire department, the police department over the years I've been in and out of the council have been nothing but positive. and I could call about the smallest, littlest thing, and I get a complete and utter response that's just outstanding. I recall when I exited last time from the council, and we talked about the county and the disaster management, and that thing today, man, it's just, we got together with chiefs, both the new chief, Allender, and Chief Maltevern, and we put together an outstanding program. I don't discount anything that the fire department does. I don't discount the fact that they're probably by far more well-served than any private organization that could happen. But at some point, you have to have a reference point. You have to say, where are we at? Even, I mean, there's been a big push in this city to look at charges in lieu of property taxes and that stuff. If you don't have any reference point, you don't even know where you're at with those. The airport board has to account for their expenses to the FAA and their lease holders and all those types of things. And from what I can see is a practice, a policy that probably made a lot of sense. It sounds like the MOU is very strong. And now I talked to the chief. I said, you know, I can understand why everybody needs to know what's going on. Everybody needs to understand. But I think where the surprise came in is the timing of the ordinance. I think that from conversations with chief and from conversations with the airport board, I think that's what gives us the heartache today. And I think that, you know, when I know damn well that if a fire happened out there, these guys would be there on top of everything. I think they were on top of the fellow who fell through the ice pond out there. But also at the same point, if we notice what Mr. Ossenford said about, he took a look at the entire value of what the fire department has to offer. And he said, what I heard, and I don't know if anybody else heard the same thing, is that the value is there. The value was there because it may be higher here, but look at we're lower here, and that stands to reason. And we're looking at the overall picture. Anybody in their own budget would do the same thing and say, are we spending more here to get more services here or whatever it was. That's the way I understood it. Maybe I'm wrong. And Mr. Ossenford, I know that we kind of, you may had more to say, and I would ask my colleagues to allow him to
you
finish what he had to
can ask
say.
me a question anytime you want, you know.
Can you finish? Do you have Can you finish what you were going to say so we make sure?
Chairman, thank you, Councilman Weifenbach. You're exactly right. The airport looked at a whole of services with the help of Chief Maltevern outlining those services. And as a whole, it's bar none, hands down, the right decision to have the Rapid City Fire Department provide the services. The reason that there is such a good MOU in place right now today is because there isn't an ordinance. At any time, the airport or the fire department could have walked away, and they're negotiating on level ground. Okay, you implement an ordinance, and you're saying the only service provider that can possibly be out there now is the Rapid City Fire Department, and every one of us has to compete every single day in our daily lives. We have to compete. You know, you guys have to run for re-election. Chad, you build a house, you know, you're up against your fellow builders. Can you do it better? Can you do it for less money? Can you do it cheaper? Can you do it with more service? We compete every single day. With an ordinance, fast forward 5 years, Chief Maltevern and our airport executive are going to make this work. It's going to be outstanding. Hands down, no questions asked. Let's fast forward 5 years. We've got Chief ABC, and he is more of a union stickler than any other chief we've ever had. If you look at the very job description of a union firefighter, it's not patrolling the perimeter fence. It's not doing all the extra things that they're currently doing for Team Airport. And that's our fear as a board, is in the future, we might not have a good chief. We've had good chiefs in the past. Good chiefs come and good chiefs go. So that's the fear, that we're not going to have team players out there, and they could. Tomorrow, if Chief Maltevern decides to retire and go skiing at Steamboat, which is in his plans, I told him to get a 2-bedroom because I'm coming and staying with him, that the new chief could say, no, absolutely not. We're not doing that. We're not patrolling the perimeter fence. We're no longer monitoring security cameras and all the stuff that they do for us extra. They're not going to do that. So that's, if the ordinance goes through and we fast forward 5 years and our airline partners then we can't justify the operational budget portion that we submit to them, and our ARF budget is higher, and then we have to hire the tech to do those. 9/11 happened. You know, you can blame bin Laden. So if the fire department is going to do those duties, we have to do that. So what's going to happen, with the passage of the ordinance is there's going to be, at that time, the airport board, the city council, and the community is going to have to make a choice. The airport has so much money. We can only afford so much. If the airlines aren't going to pay for that extra firefighter that the FAA has agreed to allow and support, then that full-time firefighter either has to be eliminated if we decide as a community to go down to one, or the city has to pick up that FTE costs, because the airport, you can't get money out of a turnip, blood out of a turnip. There's a limited budget. The airlines pay for most of the operations. So that's our fear with the ordinance.
Thank you, Mr. Rossford. I will yield my time to the mayor. He wants to say something. I think he's been up a couple times. So.
I think that's what Darla Drew was going to do, but thank you. Well, anybody object to the mayor speaking besides me? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, good afternoon, Chairman and committee, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be here. First of all, I'd say with all due respect, Todd, you aren't on level ground. The airport is a city department and has always been. And in 1981, to help the government or help the airport expand and grow and to provide a degree, and I emphasize the word degree of independence, the airport board was formed. And I want to thank you for your service. So hopefully we can still have coffee after this. But anyway, as many of you know, I enjoy visiting the various city departments and divisions and talking to citizens and employees, and this proved to be beneficial last year. Last year, during one of my trips to the airport, I discovered the airport had gone out for quotes for the airport rescue and firefighting services. This occurred without consulting with the fire department or human resources or the mayor's office. And here's the quotes. Here's the quotes. The back of the Rural Metro quote says, "On behalf of Rural Metro Department, Inc., I would like to thank you for your time and look forward to establishing a mutually beneficial business relationship with Rapid City Regional Airport." What does that look like to you guys? It's a quote. And so when the fire department and I, fire department leadership and I expressed dismay over this, work then began on a memorandum of understanding. In the meantime, I was informed of the 1989 situation and began researching it. In reviewing the 1989 situation, I found that the council had actually directed an ordinance on September 5, 1989 to require the airport to get their ARF services from the fire department. For whatever reason, it didn't come forward. Charlene Mitchell in the finance office has checked the minutes through March of 1990, 6 months after the council's motion, and we've been unable to find record of the ordinance coming forward. And by the way, if a council offers a direction on something, if it's not an ordinance, it's a resolution. Technically, you can make the argument that the 1989 resolution to bring forward an ordinance is still in effect. The airport did ask me to settle for the MOU. I had lunch with a couple of board members and the city attorney over at the Ixtapa next door, and I made it clear that I felt that the ordinance still needed to happen, but I was willing to wait with it until after the MOU was completed, because I believe that there's value in an MOU. And that has been misunderstood and construed, and yesterday I was even accused of being disingenuous. And the problem is that when the facts aren't on your side, then you end up with ad hominem attacks. And I've had ad hominem attacks leveled at me many times before, and I've survived it, and I'll survive this one too. So anyway, I agreed to delay the the ordinance until after the MOU had been presented to the board, and it was presented yesterday. This is not about cost. This isn't about cost. The cost per employment is $4.53 per presentation to this council in July of 2013. The national average per employment is $10.42. The MOU process itself further underscores the fact that going out for quotes was not about money. The first version of the MOU had language added into it allowing our airport executive director the unilateral authority to fire our firefighters for any reason. For any reason. There were lengthy discussions on this between the fire department leadership and airport leadership, and this language was removed from the MOU. Last week, just before the final version was completed, there was another attempt to add similar language back in the MOU to allow the airport executive director to fire our firefighters. It was watered down language compared to what had been previously, but it still gave authority to the airport executive director to allow him to remove our firefighters. Airport board members have reassured me they have no intention of ever contracting the ARF services away from our fire department. I believe them, and I appreciate our airport board and their service to our community. I still do. All right. Our firefighters are team-oriented and trained to raise concerns, such as, including but not limited to, concerns over our runways being closed for a manageable amount of snow. Their chain of command, though, is through the fire department and not through the airport. This is the way it should be and the way it should stay. This ordinance achieves a permanent record of what has occurred and solidifies the relationship. And those who say we were just going out there to see what the options were, I say this: I wonder how my Jennifer would feel if I joined a dating service just to see what the options were. I say this in closing. If the airport executive director ever has a problem with our firefighters, he or she should go to our fire chief. If the fire chief isn't responsive, the executive director should go to the president of the airport board and to the board. And then the airport board president and executive director should come to the mayor. It's already been proven that the airport board isn't afraid to approach me or talk to me or criticize me, and I respect them for that. And then if the mayor doesn't listen to the airport board president and executive director, then they should go to the council leadership and then the council. And that's the process. The bottom line is this relationship between the airport and fire department has its ups and downs, and it is a marriage. And let's help make it stronger by finishing the work that began in 1989, when I was a freshman in high school. And I'd say this to the airport board: why would you, and airport leadership, why would you want to keep a nuclear warhead in the arsenal if there's never going to be a chance of nuclear war? If you pledge, and we take you at your word, then you pledged, the airport board has pledged that they're not interested in ever going out for a true RFP. Well, you know what? These companies sure thought it was an RFP. These quotes, they thought that these companies wanted to do business with Rapid City. And you know what? The political thing would be to settle for the MOU. That would be the political thing to do. And you know what I've learned in this business is no matter what you do when you're in elected leadership, if you'd settled for the MOU, then it would have been political because you didn't potentially challenge the board and do the right thing, or challenge the status quo and do the right thing. The political thing to do would be to settle for the MOU, and then that kicks the can down the road for 3.5 years. And it seems in this case that I've upset people for whatever reason who may have been upset anyway, and that people just are disagreeing on this because they've been called out and they don't appreciate being called out. But after this is all over, we're going to continue to work together. And I want to close with this. Overall, this rocky road, stretch of road aside, we have a wonderful relationship with Rapid City Regional Airport. We have a water line that we have been running for the airport. We have streamlined our bill paying process for the airport. It used to take up to 70 days, you guys, to pay a bill for the airport and civic center. We've streamlined that. The airport board has a tremendous amount of autonomy, but again, this is a marriage. And I said to some of the board members and airport leadership when this came up, this is like a Presbyterian marriage. There will be no divorce and no murder. We're going to get along, and we're going to work together. And
Mr. Mayor.
And let me finish. You know what, Ron? I introduced the ordinance, and I have a responsibility to explain
Right,
it to you.
But he yielded the
I
time
have
to
the
you,
floor,
sir,
and
so he still has the floor, so. Go ahead.
So
Whenever,
Can
I
I-
mean,
can
I
I
didn't
please
want to
finish
give you
my
time to
comments?
finish, but I want to comment on some of the comments you made about, you know, just, Rapid City's been around for a long time. The fire department and the airport board have had very good relationship. 40 years. Yeah. I liken this to like the Civic Center as I ask questions. I'm not here to beat anybody up. The airport board was simply asking questions from my perspective, my point of view, to liken that to the fact that I'm going to go out and try out a few other women and versus my wife it slightly demeans what the airport board's mission is or the fire department's mission. There's absolutely, I am going to support the ordinance. I've expressed that to everybody involved. I think that, and not because I'm afraid of the airport board, not because I'm afraid of the fire department, because I'm afraid of future councils and leaderships, because this is what takes place. I think that these guys are hardworking individuals. You got volunteers that have put themselves out there to volunteers, the airport board. They've been challenged to do what they think in their hearts is the best job. They're not out here to beat anybody up, and having the conversations with Chief Multivern and having the conversations with Rod. I just can't see that we're in that predicament. I don't think that anybody feels that way from the board or the fire department. I think that when you have this going on, you always come up with a better product. And I think that's what we've done here, is come up with a better product. I'll support the ordinance because I believe that in the long run it could, because I just feel comfortable that our fire department is professional enough that they can work it out. I understand the airport board's position that they need a bargaining chip. We're taking some of that bargaining chip away when it comes to that. I'm comfortable with that. But I'm also comfortable with, this, out of all the decisions the airport board's made over the years, that this is one that we come to a better solution. Not only for, after talking to Chief Multivern, I think he's very comfortable with the MOU and the understanding, because it gives his firemen an opportunity to understand what they do out there. And I asked him the question, I said, if he had life insurance, and he said, yep, sure do. I said, what's it doing right now? He said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, having the fire department at the airport is like having a life insurance policy. You don't need it till you need it. So we all understand that. But we also understand that by doing this, by making this ordinance, we definitely have taken away a bargaining chip from the board. The people that were put in those positions to challenge everything that happens out there. So I appreciate all you've had to say, and I'll yield the floor back to you to finish. And I just wanted to make that comment that I felt that we didn't need to head down the road of likening it to something that was, in my mind, not the same situation in any form. So thank you.
I'll just say this, that, you know what, Ron, I appreciate that, and I wish you had also defended me when I was called disingenuous and accused of weaving a web. I've had conversations with you. I've been very honest with the council on what I wanted, and you know what, I want this bad. I'm the one that introduced this ordinance, and I've lost big votes before, and because and in this case, I'm not taking any chances because I know that there's opposition to this ordinance coming forward, and I want people to understand why we're doing this. We're doing this because the airport is a city department, and and they provide a service, and there are other ways to get comparisons than to do this. A way to get a comparison would be to pay $5,000 for a consulting contract to have one of these outside companies come in and evaluate the costs and that sort of thing. But the language, you guys, of the MOU proves that this isn't about costs. This is about control. This is about the airport executive director wanting the ability unilaterally to fire our firefighters. And I'm taking a stand, and I'm asking you to please stand with me unanimously. And then let's pass this, and let's move forward to continue to improve the relationship that we have with our airport. Thank you.
The chair will recognize Richie Nordstrom.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm coming into this to a little bit different perspective. Obviously, I'm a little more biased about this, and I want to thank the firefighters from the rank and file all the way up to the management people that are here present, supporting the brothers and sisters that we have at the airport. So thank you for coming down here and showing your support for that. I also agree with Ron Weifenbach being able to have that conversation, but it doesn't need to be, in my mind, and I'll defend the mayor on this point, those conversations can take place, but to the detriment or the consternation of the employees is not to be held in public. Those types of conversations can be held in a casual format or forums where they can be held really have a genuine conversation. Whereas when you start bringing it out into public, then it becomes a political venue. And whether you agree with the mayor's position on the ordinance or not, he does have the bully pulpit. And I agree with him is that we don't want to get into the position of having to worry about the next election. We just cannot carry on city business with worrying about the next city election, because the next group is going to be coming on in another year, and we'll get 6 months worth of work done. That's not effective government. So as far as worrying about the next election, we got to move on. And another reason why I'm very biased in this effort to support this ordinance is that I came out of the Public Works Division. I know what it's like to be under the gun, if you will, to be your position being contracted out. I was a water meter reader, and that position was being looked at for being contracted out. So I know what that environment was like. It also happened with the wastewater treatment plant being that lease-back effort that was going underway. And that was being looked at, and there's a potential of being contracted out there as well. It wasn't on the list, but it was that wording was within the contract. It was not very much talked about. And then another division that I was involved with heavily was the solid waste department. That was another division that was going to be looked at very seriously for being contracted out. So I understand what it's like to be under that kind of scrutiny. Don't mind the process, going through the process, but bringing it out into public so that you're vilified by some other group that doesn't like you or for whatever reason, and then wants to change the contract or yes, I'll use the word contract. They want to circumvent your contract. I have a very serious objection to that. You folks have a very good contract, and I applaud you for having the negotiations and the wherewithal with your negotiation team to bring up those issues in those contracts. When it comes to termination of employees, with that circumventing that process, using the MOU and watering it down simply to circumvent the contract, you'll find this council member being very objectionable to a termination of the employees for whatever reason. And to me, that gets into right to work. And you folks, yes, we are in a right to work state, but you have a contract first. So I applaud you for having that contract in place, and it's enforceable. And again, I'll go back to defending the mayor on this position of bringing this up is not an election process. It is something that the mayor's position has to do, and he has that obligation to take those reviews in hand, take a look at them, and this is the process that we have to work with. And I'm sorry that there has to be this concern or worry about the next election or bringing it up just to make political points. I don't believe that. I think this is best for Rapid City. I've always felt whatever is best for Rapid City, that's what I'm going to be supporting. That's where I'm at, is supporting the city of Rapid City, not any particular political agenda or gain or any political person, but what is the best for Rapid City, and I see this department as being the best for Rapid City. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair will recognize Chief Mike Multivern.
Thanks, sir. I just had just a few points to clarify here, and I feel that's my role here is to help clarify some of these things as you make a decision. But one of the things that was brought up by the airport board yesterday and both today was reference to our IAFF contract, in that if the airport was to take away tasks or add tasks to firefighters at the airport, that could be a point of contention for the union. And I will just say that our union contract does not get into the finite details of what that firefighter performs on a daily basis. To give you an example, it doesn't say when he or she will perform CPR. It doesn't spell out when he or she will stretch hose to put a fire out. And to use the example of a perimeter patrol or security duties, that contract does not spell out finite details of what firefighters will do at the airport. So that's where those day-to-day tasks would be fleshed out in the MOU process, and that's when, and even the MOU references back to the IAFF contract, that's just a guiding document that says, you know, how we'll treat employees in terms of fairness and equality and work environment. So just a point of clarification there. And then second thing is, the reason that the airport reached out to these two contractors was to do somewhat of a comparison, both for services or costs or whatever the reason was. I just want to, I guess, speak on behalf of the fire department and say we were never engaged in that process. That happened in a budget working session that the airport board assembled with staff, and I just would ask, certainly I wished we would have been at the table, and maybe if the airport board would have said, you know, the fire department's expensive, we find ourselves justifying those costs every year, why don't you call the fire department and ask? You know, let me stand there, because I've spelled out today, I hold myself and the organization to the highest degree of accountability. I would ask the board to do the same. Call me up. Hey, we're having a working session next month. Man, we got to defend to the airlines that you guys are expensive. Come and talk to me, or tell the board, explain to us why we pay so much compared to Green Bay or Winnemucca. And so, in 3 minutes, in preparation for yesterday's board meeting, I pulled some statistics out of our data collection at the fire department and determined that in 3 years' time, we did 3,135 calls for service at the airport, and of those, 84% of them were duties outside of our normal mission, being fire, rescue, and EMS. So I would love to arm you with those statistics to take back to the airlines and say, look, you have to have them for fire, rescue, and EMS, but look what we're getting is this 84% of what they're doing is related right back to the airlines and security and all those things. So that's one point. Second thing is, I want to clarify the point, the term firing is being thrown out. I just want to clarify, I don't want to speak for the mayor, but I think that's a figure of speech. In that MOU, what was the wishes of the airport was to have the ability of the airport executive director to reassign or remove firefighters from the airport fire station. So if they didn't like the way I disciplined them, or I mentored them or coached them, or that firefighter wasn't maybe measuring up to what they felt they should be, they wanted the ability to call me up and just say, firefighter A, move them back to town. That just didn't work for us. That's where you get into union contract issues and things like that. It's just a random reassignment of employment for no reason outside of the city's normal HR practices. So I just want to clarify that it's not that they could call me up and say, fire this guy or gal. It was more of a reassignment. And so we've used the word as a figure of speech, I believe, for firing. But anyway, just 3 points of clarification, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. Chair recognizes Darla Drew.
I have a couple of questions for Chief Multivern. I still will say I'm a newbie even after 7 months, but I've heard you talk about providing other services without going into too much, detail. You seem like a value-added kind of emergency service. So what else are you doing there?
Okay. Obviously, we meet the minimum requirements for the airport. Every airport that's recognized by the FAA has to meet, under their certification, some safety requirements. To give you a brief example, the FAA requires a firefighter at the airport to go through 40 hours of initial training and then 11 hours of continuing education each year. A Rapid City firefighter undergoes those minimums, and in addition, about 260 hours of training each year. So our employees go through about 300 hours of training a year in comparison to only 11 hours that the FAA requires. So that's that value-added service, just to use one example. To give you other examples that we provide, I got a number of different presentations, but and I've got them listed out. Structure fires, contract firefighters won't go to a building fire, just a plain incident. Structure fires, wildland fires like grass fires that either start on the airport property or outside of the property that threaten the airport. We do emergency medical services. We have a full transport ambulance service. A contractor would not do that. We have mutual aid agreements with all of our neighboring departments and relationships that go back decades. A contractor wouldn't have that. They would have to reestablish those relationships. And to define that relationship, that's called mutual aid. And what it means is you've got a fire department and I have one. If we have a mutual aid agreement, that means if I need your help, you're going to come and help me. And conversely, we're going to help each other out if we need each other. A contractor, a forest service provider, they're not going to leave the airport property. So they're not going to have mutual aid agreements with the outlying fire departments. And you've seen that brought up in a couple of letters of support that those volunteer fire departments aren't going to sign a mutual aid agreement because the contractor wouldn't be able to reciprocate that service. So that's a little bit of a point of contention. Another example is our 911 center. I pay hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, as does the police chief and sheriff, to have a fully functional state-of-the-art 911 center. If a contractor comes in, that 911 center is not going to provide that service. So that contractor is going to have to pay for that service from our 911 center. That was a hidden cost that was never brought up. That's an example of, I wish that we would have been involved in the conversations, because I think I probably could have vetted those things out in the airport board. Maybe would have never even reached out to those two contractors. I think it would have been so black and white in what you're hearing in the testimony today. The services go on and on with training, expertise, incident command, and a big one for me is a deep bench. We've got 143 employees, okay? We have a hire back system with pagers and phones and all this technology. A contractor comes in, has to provide 7 employees, 7, to protect the airport and meet all their requirements. 7. We have 143.
Wow.
Okay? On any given day, I have approximately 40 firefighters that are trained to that 300 hours a year that are ready to go. I alluded in my presentation earlier. Right now, today, sitting in fire stations or on calls, I have 13 firefighters that have either served the airport or are currently serving the airport as specialized airport firefighters. 13. They have 7. There'd be 2 on duty. They'd have to call the other 5 from the golf course or the fishing pond. So point is, it's a David and Goliath thing, and not to say that David always comes out on top, but I'm telling you, we're Goliath in this particular instance, and we can show up and get it done. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that answer. Just a couple of comments as I listen here. And I know we'll go through this again on Monday night, but I won't have to hear that. We know what they do. And as far as an ordinance for 5 years, I think Mr. Ossenford is horribilizing that maybe there's going to be a chief somewhere in the future that won't listen to anyone and just go off on his own or her own and do things that are inappropriate. So ordinances can be changed. That's what we're here to do. We're here to look at what's going on and give it our best answer. And hopefully if there's a big problem down the road that we don't see, but boards are fallible. They're not infallible. Council is fallible. But, you guys you hired that Humphreys guy, he took us on a big ride for a vacation. And, so you have some questionable choices that you've made. And I will just say it outright. So this is the 1989 resolution that we're talking about, and it's still there on the table. And I'd like to see us go ahead and complete this because it's been something that the mayor has researched very well, and I think that I can support this ordinance and codify the relationship between the fire department and the airport. Thank you.
Before I recognize Mr. Laurenti, please leave any past employees out of it. Thank you. Mr. Laurenti, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. And I just have a couple of last comments. And I appreciate Alderwoman's comments there. Those are right on mark. That was one of the things I was going to mention. We have changed many, many ordinances, dissolved and changed, deleted, replaced many, many ordinances, gotten rid of many different committees that people just loved and were very proud to be a member of, but we're really slowed down government. And that's one thing this mayor has done. To the mayor, if this had come up last year, not in an election cycle, anybody who knows this mayor who had served on the council for many years before he was the mayor, it would have been done last year if he were on the council, not even the mayor, if this had come up. So he would have done this as a council member, forget whether he's the mayor or not. It would have come to the council. So the MOU isn't taken out by the ordinance. The MOU still creates that relationship with the fire department, and the chief spoke about that. But what the ordinance does is it guarantees the safety of our citizens, and I think that's extremely important. And I agree with the mayor. It puts the fire department on the same level with the board now, because the board now has to come through the democratic process and come back to ultimately the council. And I highly doubt that mayors in the future and executives or directors of the board and of our fire department, that it will never get to the council. But if it does, that's the whole point, that the process gets completed. There isn't some shortcut for the board, for the airport board, and these ordinances can be changed. If our fire department, which will never happen, became a detriment to our fire suppression out at the airport, I'm quite sure it doesn't matter what council, they would ensure the safety of our citizens. So thank you very much.
Chair will recognize Mr. Ron Weifenbach again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to clarify it with a question for Mr. Landine.
By all means.
Mr. Landine, when it was mentioned about the hiring or the situation with Mr. Humphreys, just want to clarify the fact that did the council ratify, did they or did they not ratify that?
I don't believe they ratified it. They were certainly briefed on it, but ultimately it was the airport board's decision. I would also point out that Mr. Humphreys was expected to do work and did in fact do work from New Zealand in exchange for the compensation he received in that contract.
Just want to clarify that, so thank you. And I think Mr. Rosenford.
I would just like to, in closing, I'd just like to point out that what the mayor said, what Chief Maltaverne said, what Councilman Laurenti has said, just put an exclamation point on my point that there's no need for an ordinance. You have all of these safeguards already in place. If there's a fireman that's not getting along or not fulfilling his duties, they go to the airport director or they go to the fire chief, and then the fire chief would come to the mayor, and the mayor would come to city council. This is just an extra unnecessary ordinance that doesn't need to be passed. And it was alluded to also in the sausage making process, about he said, she said. Chief Maltaverne, the final MOU that was ratified yesterday says who has final control over all the firefighters out at the airport.
Go ahead, Chief.
Yeah.
Up until it was up for debate until Friday afternoon.
Well, I mean, we
So,
can get into
yeah,
all of the grisly details. It took 2 years to get us where we're at, Mike.
Agreed.
2 years, but the final agreement, we should be jumping up and down, high-fiving each other. It's a tremendous accomplishment. You guys have no idea. The unprecedented amount of work, and like I said, I'm so excited. I'm so excited for the fire department. I'm so excited for the airport board. Ron hit the nail on the head when he said the sausage-making process worked. We are in a better spot today. Everybody involved, everybody, bar none, agrees we are all in a better spot because of what took place and the work from the fire department and the airport board and the city council.
Thank you, and I think that'd be a good positive note to lead it on. I don't think that there's been a lot of public scrutiny on on a failure of anybody to ever do anything. I've never even heard that in the conversation, so I appreciate ending on a good note. In the sausage making, sometimes, like you said, and that's why they call it sausage making, it can get ugly, and if we're keeping it behind scenes for I don't think that it's been a public, he said, she said that I can recall. So I think in the end that it has come to a good conclusion after my conversations with Chief on several occasions and his staff, my conversations with the mayor, my conversations with you today. And in the end, I think that my supporting the ordinance is the right thing for me to do. And my rationale is simply I laid it out. I'm not afraid of the board. I'm not afraid of the fire department. I'm afraid of the future councils. I've been here on several of them, serving with several different, and I'm sure that we can all appreciate that. So, and I thank you, and I thank everybody, and I want to make sure that we leave on a positive note, because that relationship with the airport board, and that relationship, understanding that the mayor appoints the airport board, and we ratify it, or however that all works, and that relationship, in any working relationship, has to be good. And I think at this point it is good. I think it'll continue to be good. And I think through the leadership of the airport board, the mayor, and our chief, I think we're going to be where we want to be. And I appreciate what the airport board does, and I appreciate what the fire department does on a daily basis. Like I said, you're like an insurance policy as far as I'm concerned. If my daughter's coming in on an airplane, I want to make sure that we're not looking backwards. We have a tendency to do that sometimes, but sometimes the process of getting to that point where we're not looking backwards is a little bit tough, but we got to make sure we don't take it down to a personal level. We keep it at a professional level, and everybody can win. And I think the city and the taxpayers and everybody can win in this situation. So thank you, and I'll leave it at that.
Okay, I have no more speaker lights, and if anybody else is still awake, I'm going to say a couple things, just because it's a couple things that I think need to be pointed out in this. As far as having the fire department out there, and I say this with the utmost respect for the members of the airport board, and I think that the hardest part about this is I feel like I'm being forced to choose between the two entities, between the fire department and the airport board, and obviously I support both, and so I just want to know that I'm voting for an ordinance because of public safety ultimately, and my family, my kids are really young, so we watch a lot of planes, fire and rescue. Last thing I want is Dusty Crawpopper showing up there if there's a plane going down. And I mean that in a joking sense, but I also mean in a sense that, show up and get a certification in 40 hours, you're a professional firefighter suddenly, and you can take care of the plane crashes. I don't want that. Personally, that's just not what I'm looking for. And I believe me, I've seen that movie so many times. But, another thing that I think needs to be mentioned here too, and this is something I've talked to the chief about, is the medical calls. I think medical calls are your probably number one call out there. I don't know of a lot of plane crashes that happen out at the airport. I'm not aware of any, or fuel situations or whatever, but I imagine there's a lot of heart attacks, a lot of people, heavy breathing problems or whatever going on. And I know that there's firefighters on duty that will respond to those. My understanding is contract firefighters don't do that, if I'm correct. You still have to send an ambulance out, which the response time becomes 15 minutes instead of 2 minutes. So that's something I think I take greatly into account myself, and I can justify in my mind the added expense to the taxpayers to know that there's someone on duty who deals with this on a routine basis and is there quickly. And so it's not just about the catastrophic events, it's about the day-to-day events, and that for me that's very important. Also what it does is, as Rod Seals has pointed out to me, it increases the certification of the city by expanding our reach, and allows our response times to be, when we go to get certified by the various organizations, and I don't know those organizations, but we have another station out there that is allowed to, it shows that we can respond quicker to events in other parts of the city. And I do believe we've actually used those trucks for other events like the propane fire that happened, a year and a half ago, a couple years ago, whatever it was. Fuel farm, whatever it was there. But we have those those abilities to respond off of the airport and still bring those trucks and use them for other things. So for me, that's the reason for codifying this relationship. It's not about telling the airport board that we're in charge now or anything else. I just want to know that when this goes down, no matter what, if you decide to learn nothing else, the last people that need to be dealing with this is us. This is just something that needs to be set in stone. Hopefully it works out. I trust that you're a professional organization. Firefighters are professionals. They do their job no matter what, even if the pay is not good or whatever, the conditions aren't great, they're still going to go out and take care of whatever happens out there. So those are my reasons for supporting. I think it need to be put out there for sure that the public understands it might cost you a little more money, but the medical calls alone, to me, is a reason alone, and the response times. So anyway, that's my point, and I think everybody else has talked. So the motion on the floor is to approve. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, folks, for showing up and Hopefully you're not busy today. Item number 28 is a second reading of, and a recommendation of ordinance 6030 regarding supplemental appropriation number 1 for 2015. Motion approved by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 29 is to acknowledge the election of President's Plaza by LLC. Motion to acknowledge by Laurenti, second by Nordstrom. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Motion to adjourn? Second. Motion by Nordstrom, second by Darla Drew. All in favor say aye. Aye. Motion carries. We are adjourned.